Hey, everybody, it's Friday night, and that means another episode of the Asea 5, or tonight, the Asea 4, the Fab 4. But that's fine. We have some fabulous guests that will join us, and we have a surprise guest maybe a little later on because he's not here yet, but that's okay. I'm Dr. Maureen Hayes from Galveston, Texas, and I'm joined by Jim and Ann Glenn from San Antonio, Texas. Ann is our personal trainer and nutritionist, and Jim is our big money man, former stockbroker. And tonight we have a very special guest, a fan favorite, somebody who has just an amazing testimonial. He's a medical professional by training. He's a respiratory therapist. Chuck Grijalva. Named after a river in Spain. So there you go. So he has an amazing story. And if you want to share it with other people, and I know you're going to want to, you can share the recording of this call after we get it up on the archives on redoxmatters.com or on realredoxresults.com. It's number 70. And it is an amazing story. So Chuck, without further ado, I'm going to bring you on. Give us a little bit about your background, your training as a respiratory therapist, what you were dealing with before you really got into Asea. I know you tried it for a while, really didn't see much benefit, and then kind of took things into your own hands after your last challenge. And there is our surprise guest sneaking on, and we'll introduce him after we've heard from Chuck. So Chuck, take it away.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me tonight, Maureen. My training, like you said, is I am a respiratory therapist. I have been one for about 30 years. And last month we celebrated our 9-year anniversary with Asea. I have a couple of different autoimmune conditions that I was suffering with and still working at the hospital as a therapist. And I worked with a nurse friend of mine who knew I was suffering from challenges. And fortunately, she was persistent enough to get me to try Asea. I had suffered from discomfort in my knees and my hands, fatigue, and just not having a whole lot of energy to do things. And so I went ahead and tried. Dr. Walker came down to do a presentation of Tri-Cities and decided to go ahead and try Asea and give it a 90-day trial. And yeah, I did get some relief of the discomfort and experience a little bit more energy, but I didn't know it was necessarily worth the expense at the time. Because at that time I was getting forced out of the hospital. I couldn't do the hours, and I was getting sick too much, and so I had to retire from the hospital. And so money was a little bit of an issue. I wasn't sure it was really worth the expense. So I dabbled with it on and off for about a year, and developed a mass on my tongue that had road cells in it that was rapidly growing. Was going to require some pretty expensive surgical intervention. Basically, they removed half my tongue. But because of my underlying lung condition and some cardiac issues, they expected me to be at the University of Washington for 8 days. I developed a fistula out the bottom of my neck from where they resected my tongue, and that wasn't healing. And so I had a feeding tube and was taking all my nutrition and fluids through that. And in the process, my gallbladder decided to go on strike and went gangrenous on us. That required removal, and of course that incision also got infected, requiring a wound pump. And so long story short, I was supposed to be there 8 days, but I spent 64 days, 4 major surgeries. And when I left the hospital, I was broken. I just couldn't do anything. At the time, my daughters were 5 and 10. And with a lung condition, I wasn't as active as I used to be, as I was when I was in my 20s, but we were still active. We would go fishing and hiking and hunting, doing that type of thing. But I couldn't even walk across the living room without having to stop, take a break. And the kind of fatigue from those types of surgeries, you're just really tired. And I had pretty much kind of given up. I'd lost my will to live. And then it was the first day home by myself. My wife is a nurse and was my caretaker, but She had to go back to work. So the girls are at school. I'm home by myself. And I go into the bathroom. I fortunately had forgotten to turn my auto ship off. And so I had several cases there. I'm like, gosh, what am I going to do with this stuff? I know it doesn't work because I wouldn't be in this mess if it did, right? And then the back of my mind was our surprise speaker. I could hear him making his funny faces and his weird noises and stuff, saying, this stuff's perfectly safe. You might as well shoot it up your bait tube. And so I started like, oh gosh, I got nothing to lose. So I started using 16 ounces up my feeding tube. And that's when the magic really, really started happening. My wound pump was gone within 30 days. My feeding tube was gone within 60 days. But what I think is significant about that is I had to do a 30-day trial of eating and drinking before they would pull the feeding tube. And so in essence, this was all healed up in 30 days after doing the higher serving size of Asea. But what was most significant to me was 90 days later was Father's Day weekend. And my girls and I were able to go fishing.
That's good.
I was able to be a dad again. And in all honesty, I believe Asea saved my life, but it gave me my life back. It's improved my quality of life. I do things with my girls now that I have no business doing. I shouldn't be able to do, but I do. We do things and experience. I'm able to be a dad, and so that's pretty cool for me. And then so here's the update of that. Last July, I used to see 7 specialists at the University of Washington. And most of them are the department chairs because I'm such an oddball. They all want to see me. So basically everybody that works on me at the university is the department chair or assistant chair. So last July, I saw, July before last, I saw 7 specialists. This July, I saw 1.
Wow.
And that was my pulmonologist. And he has decreased my visits to once a year with the diagnosis that the average life expectancy is 3 to 5 years. And I've been seeing him for 18. The other doctors that I no longer see told me that I no longer had anything that they needed to follow. And with that, I'm off 11 different medications because of that, all under their supervision. So I honestly believe it's not a matter of if Asea works. It's a matter of finding your magic number and taking it long enough to see the benefits.
I love that, Chuck, and I love that you said that. And let me just stop right now and just say this is not, we have a lot of medical professionals who are involved with the company, but it is not a medical product. We're not here to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent anything. What we do is provide a bioreplenishment agent of redox signaling molecules. This allows your cells to communicate with each other better. The signaling between your cells is restored and maybe amplified, and it allows the body to do what it knows how to do, which healing is one of those processes. And I have to say, Chuck, I'm sitting here and I am just in awe, really. Sometimes we can't help ourselves, but I'm listening to you talk, and with what you've gone through, your speech is so clear and your color is so good, and your breathing. It's miraculous, really. I really have to say, if you would, could you speak a little bit, because you talked about being on enough for long enough. Could you talk about, super saturating your cells? Kind of speak to that.
Absolutely. When I discovered this was Dr. Walker was one of the first people to say, 8 ounces for anybody over 50 is probably what's needed. And I was on 8 ounces. I still had significant joint discomfort and fatigue on that serving size. And then my wife and I went down to Salt Lake when they came out with their genetic study and showed that this works on inflammation. I wonder what would happen if I went to 12 ounces. And within 30 days, I was off 3 different pain medications. And so I'm like, okay, well, there's something to this. So I try to go back down to 8 ounces, and sure enough, the discomfort comes back. And so my magic number is 12 ounces. And that seems to be what my body needs to get my cells taken care of, communicating effectively enough to keep the fire down to a low roar in my body. And so with the people in our team, what we recommend is for them to titrate up to the point where they notice something, maintain that for a period of time, and then try to decrease that until whatever it was they were experiencing in the past starts coming back. And then we kind of figure out what their magic number is for a serving size. And that varies from person to person. You know, I'm on 12. That's my magic number. My wife is over 50, and 8 is hers. My mom definitely is over 50, and 6 appears to work well for her. So you can't really do the rule of thumb over 50, you need 8. You kind of have to titrate. Everybody is different. Everybody responds differently. And so we kind of play with it that way with our team.
And Ann can speak to this because it sometimes depends on what else you're doing for yourself, or what else you have going on, like nutrition, sleep, things like that. Ann and Jim, do you want to introduce our mystery guest?
I'm not sure if I know who that is. Jerry White, research physical therapist, part-time comedian, along with Maureen and us. Jerry, you know Chuck fairly well, because if I'm not mistaken, Chuck, you kind of live pretty close to Jerry. Jerry, can you shed any more light on, and I know you probably didn't hear the first part of it, we're having some difficulty getting you on board, but what was going on with Chuck, kind of what you remember of his journey? You're muted, Jerry.
Uh-oh. Did it work?
No, he's got to unmute.
There he is.
There you go.
All right.
Hi.
You would think I've never used Zoom before, but it made me reload it on both the computer and now I'm on the phone. There's someone who doesn't want me on here.
We do.
But yeah, Chuck was a very, very interesting case, just in the fact that he was sucked through a knothole backwards and like a frog blown in a blender when we found him. And so to go to work on that was kind of a challenge. And I mean, a lot of us kind of take a deep breath and go, well, I hope you get makes you put a little bit of happy in your breakfast, but we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. And here he bounces way back. It's just kind of a testament to the fact that the human body is absolutely miraculous, and the healing processes are so incredibly complex that somehow, some way, it can find its way back home. And Asea really, by turning on the street lights and the signs and all that sort of stuff, allows those cells to figure out a way to pull it off. And so we're grateful because Chuck has so much to offer in the world. And if he was never able to fish again, I mean, the world would be a poorer place.
Now, Chuck, your background, I'm sorry, I was kind of distracted in the beginning trying to get Jerry on. Did you go over your background as a respiratory therapist?
A little bit. I touched on that. I've been one for about 30 years. I've taught at the college level. I've been a manager, director in large tertiary facilities, all the way down to critical access hospitals.
And you started having issues with your lungs when?
Before I became a therapist. Nobody knows what a respiratory therapist is until you need one. And I was actually going to school to be a firefighter paramedic when I became ill with my lungs and couldn't do that any longer. And so in the process of doing rehab, one of the guys I was on the fire department with was like, well, you ever thought about being a respiratory therapist? I'm like, what's that? And so I started doing some investigating. I thought, well, I'm walking in their shoes. I guess I got a little bit of street cred when I tell them to do something. And I went ahead and pursued that. And it's been a really a blessing to do that and see people improve, and being able to help improve the quality of their life. And quite frankly, that was one of the things I really missed when I had to retire from the hospital. And I mentioned previously that Asea has given me back my life, and that's an area that it has given it back to me, is I'm able to make a difference in other quality of life again. And quite frankly, I think I'm doing it in far bigger ways than I ever did in the hospital. And I'm the guy who runs the life support equipment. And so, I think I'm making a bigger difference, a bigger impact in people's lives doing this than I ever did in the hospital.
With your background in medical, was it difficult for you to understand the technology that we have, being that it's saltwater? I mean, did you have any thoughts in the beginning that this is a scam? Because again, salt water from Salt Lake City that tastes like pool water.
I was on high alert, quite frankly. It was one of those, if it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Right.
And I said 9 years ago, there just wasn't the research and the studies out there that there are now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the science is there now. It wasn't 9 years ago. Fortunately, Catherine was so persistent. I basically got on Asea to get her off my back. And had I not done that, I wouldn't be here. And now the science is there, and it's indisputable. It's there now.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of what I say. We have evidence that demands a verdict, right? You can't deny it. Jerry, how did you deal with that in your beginning? If you don't mind, share your journey, because I think you kind of had a difficult time as well understanding and believing in this, correct?
In this particular product and the particular way it was done, I had been doing a lot of alternative things for a long time, because I was looking at really weird neurologic sets from the kids at the Shriners Hospital, and had an opportunity to look at it from a very different set of eyes than most practitioners, because it was a self-funded hospital system based on a huge endowment. And at the time they had a big windfall, and they kind of recruited me over to work with, or initially it was athletes. They wanted to open up a sort of an athlete session as a physical therapist. And there were two other areas. One was unusual pain syndromes, and the third was eating disorders. And so I had worked in those areas previously and came over to the Shrine, and almost immediately they wanted to stretch. They wanted to do some new science. They wanted to get out and begin to start to look at a way to set up a laboratory that would do predictive outcomes for surgeries. And so there were apparently two prototype labs in the world. One was in San Diego and another one was in Europe. And those prototype labs are called motion analysis labs and gait labs. And so the cool thing was, they said, you've got this background in unusual pain. Well, what I had done for years was working with magnetic fields and infrared light. And I was working on things that really affected the nervous system with those pieces, and happened to stumble upon the fact that some of these things would modify what people felt in what's called a phantom limb pain. So if you were missing a limb, but it hurt anyway and drive you nuts, there was this really interesting correlation with magnetic fields. So all of that went into why they asked me to go out there, because it was something that really wasn't there yet. And so I was not as skeptical in terms of water. I'd been doing a lot of study on water. I was working with another company previously with water and salt, water purification, water and its microclustering and all kinds of different things. And the factors that change in salt, that overlapped with my other life, which was coaching, and in the long distance endurance coaching and the loss of electrolytes, we were working with salt. So that part was kind of, the door was somewhat open. Then I got a call from a couple of housewives that were really good networkers. One of them was Trish Schwinkler, and the other one was Denny Robinson. And they called me up from the headquarters at Asea very early on, and just 3 years before I finally gave up and joined them. And they said, there's this stuff, and we don't know how to tell up or down whether it's good or not, but it seems amazing. Would you do us a favor and fly down and talk to the guy that stabilized it?
Whoops.
Phone drop.
There you are. You're back.
It
Right
doesn't
on
help.
cue.
Doesn't help the oops, So I got a chance to go down there, and at first I was saying, okay, I have to admit this to you. Yes,
I'm not sure I understand.
oh my goodness. What is it called? I got to change something here.
Yeah, your Siri's
My
going off. It
computer
sounds
was
like.
behind my phone, and the phone had some Siri thing that was the computer did, so I dumped it. It's gone. So what was interesting was that we were working on water and that sort of stuff with another company, and so I actually was making CDs as science CDs for that company to explain away this thing called Asea at first, saying, oh, your body does that. It automatically takes that salt water and modifies it into something else. Even if it's magic, I don't understand. I know it's possible. And so I made these CDs with the guy and we put them out there. And I was actually arguing against it before I knew anything. And the old saying says that everybody's ignorant just on different subjects, and those who are most dangerous were the ones who were opinionated in their ignorance. So I was an opinionated ignoramus on the subject, but boy, was I coming across as an authority on those CDs. And when I went down to talk to Gary Samuelson, that canceled all of that out. Those guys were on the ball, and they were so far ahead. It was unbelievable. So I came home, and I was all in. I'm not experiment with anything. One time, my granddad said, if you start losing your hair, you just rub chicken manure on it. But I can here to tell you that didn't help to grow your hair, but it sure burns your head. So I'd try almost anything. And so I started working with the Asea. And the first thing I saw was it was really a change in athletic performance. And that was part of my world. So I could see that as I was doing repeats in the pool, that's doing these 100-yard swims over and over. You do a series of 10 of them, let's say, and you got a time that you leave on a new one, and you go a certain speed. And all of a sudden, I dropped 4 seconds on the speed in which you don't do that after 45 years of swimming. And I was shocked, and my heart rate was actually lower. So I loved that. So I actually stuffed this stuff in the closet on my side, and my wife is far more observant than I am. I had it there, and it drove her nuts. She said, "What is that stuff? Is it paint thinner? Get it out of the closet." And Jenny's got me using this stuff, and I guess I kind of want to use it. She's going, oh, whatever. And then my daughter got sick, and when your daughter gets sick, it doesn't matter, man. You'll do whatever it takes. And it was a remarkable situation. So it was a collision of a lot of different things. But most importantly, I'm one of those people, at least clinically, that, if I can find a way where it shows a response and clearly shows a response over and over again. Some of the neurologic testing that I was doing back in those days, I just automatically started testing it, and it was better than anything I'd ever seen before. So your nervous system seemed to be able to respond to a balance challenge in astronomical ways. Well, that pertains to a lot of good things with people who are balance challenged, or if you're an athlete or anything else, all the way up and down the scope. So that was huge for me, was that it just plain worked, and it worked quickly. So I just experimented like crazy. I was growing plants. I was checking the electrolytes. I was sticking light bulbs in it. I was doing all kinds of stuff. and it had these really weird properties. But for the most part, it worked on people that I cared about, and that was really the answer. Went from there.
Cool. Chuck, how do you explain to someone, because we have a lot of people that watch this that may never have heard of any of this. How do you explain what redox molecules are, since our redox expert, Dr. Osler, is taking some time with some in-laws, so he's not with us tonight. So how would you explain what redox molecules are to the layperson, not to someone like you guys that's medical?
I try to keep it a little bit more simple than Dr. Osler goes into. But the way I do it is redox signaling is fundamental for your cells to talk. And up until puberty, our bodies produce 100% of what we need. And at puberty is when we start producing 1 to 2% less a year. And so in theory, by age 50, we're roughly running about 50% of production. And that's when our cells are starting to not effectively communicate, and we start seeing signs of aging, gray hairs, wrinkles, chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, etc. But to take it a step farther, we've all seen toddlers learn how to walk, fall down, skin their knee, tomorrow, no sign of a scratch. But our 80-year-old grandparent falls down and skins her knee, and 2 weeks later, still a nasty mess. Why is that? Well, the toddler is running at 100% peak efficiency, and the geriatric is running at maybe 20%. And so those cells aren't communicating, and they're not healing like they're supposed to. Where the toddler is cranking on all cylinders and is able to, they're just a machine when it comes to healing themselves. Another one is everybody has roughly 75 to 100 trillion cells in their body. Everybody has millions of cancer cells. What keeps a cancer cell in one person from growing into something that's life-threatening? But in the majority of people, nothing happens. The cells around it are effectively communicating and saying, and this is what's fundamental about redox signaling, you need to fix yourself or we're going to replace you with a healthy cell. And then it gets fixed or replaced in the person who doesn't have any problems with that illness. And that's kind of how I do it. It's fundamental that your cells talk to each other.
Awesome.
But Jerry, can you kind of cover, or Maureen, our bodies are continually, as we go and live our life, our bodies are going to continue to come under stress, whether it be with diet or maybe too much exercise, obviously not enough. But we're always going to be aging. And if you're not doing anything to protect it, like with what we have, you're just going to age quicker. But even with what we're taking, you still need to watch what you do, correct?
Sure.
Yep. And Maureen's always, like, if you want to jump in, Maureen, that's great.
I was going to give the floor to you, Professor.
Well, but thank you, but I would give it back to you. So here we go. As we look at what is the most common thing people see that would be a factor in their life that they could consider as reverse aging, well, it's an adaptation to stress. And the stress would be consistent, appropriate exercise, challenging the system in a way where there's something in those cells that's saying, whoa, if you're going to keep doing that, we're going to have to build a better mousetrap here. We're going to have to improve this cell. Now, that is fundamentally one of the miracles of life, is this thing called adapting or adaptation, where you take the normal course would be to continually degrade, break down, and rot over time, essentially rusting inside your cells. And it's reversing that process. So if somebody says that slowing down the aging process is not possible, let them show up in spandex next week and we'll get started on them. Because their body will respond if appropriately challenged and build a better body. Well, that's a pretty interesting place to start, because it means that the cells that are currently existing, someone once said that it takes about 7 years for every cell in your body to be replaced by somebody new, to keep you fresh and new and going. And so what Asea does and what it allows to happen is to read the original information on the DNA much more like you read it when you were young. And when it allows that to happen, it goes, well, what the heck are we doing it with damage for? Why do we keep putting the same problem back in the same place? It was because you were not communicating properly. But now that you increase the communication, it says, heck, we have always done that. When we didn't have the wrong communication, and it just kicks things into gear and fixes it. We can stand back with all the wonder and appreciate it, but it's almost like watching corn grow. You know, it's going to do it because God said it was going to do it. The cells figure it out, and the cells go through a process. They're much smarter than we are, and if we give them the information to do it, it's remarkable what they do to fix it.
Maureen, with your background as a doctor, and Jerry, I don't know if we covered what your background was. Can you kind of cover that real quick?
Well, I usually tell people in these events I used to be ugly. And
look at
so
you
now.
Jerry,
Yeah.
I've seen you. I think I've seen you in a dress on one of your kid videos doing some kind of weird dance thing.
Yeah.
So I may need to get Marcia to play that.
Dude,
First, let's tell people.
no, that's a
who he
problem.
is.
That's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, who
All
are
right,
you,
well-
Jerry? Why should people listen to you?
Okay,
Besides
well-
being dressy.
One of the things that Marcia likes to help me understand is don't tell too much about your past. You know, it's your present and your future that really matter most. And so for years I've always said, both of us were national caliber swimmers, and we met actually coaching together. By that time, I'd had an exercise physiology degree, and had gone to college for like 15 years afterwards, because it was really cool. It was like living in a millionaire's mansion, and there was only people your age, and it was pretty easy, and it didn't cost all that much. And I loved learning, so I studied every doggone thing you can imagine, and finally had to get out. That's another story. I met a girl, but so I finally had to get out of school and go be and do something. And so I started kind of going down the path of coaching. It's one of the things I knew. And I actually bid on a contract. The very first thing I ever did was I found that they were letting a contract out from the federal government for it was right around the Title IX era. And every construction job in America had to have women in the non-traditional jobs. And so this federal grant was for teaching women in unconventional new areas how to do things physically that they just were never really exposed to before. So I set up that program, ran it for 3 years, and that was my first job. So from there, I guess I was entrepreneurial, but I went into coaching, had some great success coaching athletes. Marcia was my assistant coach, and she looked at me one day and said, if you want anything to happen between us, okay, go on. You're going to have to get a job that pays more than $800 a month. So she introduced me to this hospital that had put in 3 pools, and I went up there and started establishing a aquatic therapy program, and got introduced to physical therapy, went into physical therapy, and ended up being kind of the head of research at Shriners Hospital. And because of all the different varied worlds that I had, that's when we started building this laboratory called the Human Performance and Gait Analysis Lab, that was looking at taking current conditions or surgical approaches to orthopedic conditions that were based on a kid's got a messed up nervous system. We can't really rely on it. is there a way we can do some orthopedics and neuro to allow them to have a better life and better gait and how they walk and how they stand and all that. So all that stuff was all in this pile, and I was teaching in through my laboratory with medical students that were coming through. And so, boy, I sure don't know how to answer a question short, but that's really what I was doing. I got an associate. And,
Cool.
That's kind of what my background was.
Okay, so Maureen, and maybe even with Chuck, Jerry says that we have a technology that actually allows the body to do what the body was made to do, which is to protect every cell, to detect an issue, correct me if I'm wrong, and then if there is an issue, to repair it, and if it's not repairable, to order that cell to go bye-bye and a healthy cell to replace it. Honestly, that sounds crazy. That there's actually a technology out there that does this. And I understand that people, even you, I think, thought it was not real, right? In the beginning?
Are you talking to me or to Chuck?
Yeah, you, Maureen.
Yeah, I think we both felt the same way. I thought it sounded, I had not heard the terminology, the verbiage, redox signaling molecules. So when it was brought to me, first by somebody that I knew as an acquaintance, and then by a friend of mine, but he had a background in computer sales, not in science or medicine or anything. So hearing about a product that was made from salt water, frankly, sounded kind of stupid. It's like, give me a break. And, we live on an island, so we're surrounded by salt water. So kind of like Jerry White, I wasn't looking to, to pay for it. And, I think I had been in that same company with Jerry White. And I think I had one of those CDs that said you could make your own Asea, putting Himalayan, correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, but Himalayan salt in alkaline water. You got the same stuff. And I was like, I'll just make Jerry's concoction. But, I say it was a leap of faith. So, for some reason, and we got in probably about the same time that Chuck did. It's, we're actually coming up on 10 years. Now, we got in because of my husband's health challenge. I did not want to be affiliated with sharing this with anybody. I was not going to talk to anybody about it. I wanted to see what it would do for my husband. And his was breathing as well, Chuck. And, if it helped, then I might talk to other people, or I would, share it, but I wasn't going to go out and look for other people to try it. But I did watch, we did have some studies done by Dr. David Neiman with the Human Performance Lab at Appalachian State. So this is a gentleman who has studied athletic performance products for athletes and puts them through all sorts of tests, cycling, checking their VO2 max and different things like that. And what it showed is that there was a shift in the metabolites, shift in what they were using. They were using, and this is actually Jerry's field much more than mine, so you jump in here, Jerry, if you like. But it took them from using sugars or glycogen, carbohydrates, to using free fatty acids for fuel. So they were actually burning cleaner fuel. So what happened is there was less lactic acid buildup in the muscles and the recovery was much faster. And this was a pretty incredible change. And they had changes in their physiology that you would normally see after, extensive training that was happening just within a week of being on these products. So it was pretty profound. And since my husband's issue was with breathing, I thought, well, I don't know exactly how it's doing that, looking at the pathophysiology of what was going on with him and what might be reconciled. I was like, it must have to do with oxygen in the blood. I mean, that's how I kind of justified it to myself. And I thought, what do we have to lose? It's 100% non-toxic. My husband was in his 50s, really severely respiratory, compromised. And this is a gentleman who, like Jerry, was a marathon runner, still at the time that he was diagnosed with this challenge, was running 8-10 miles a day. Went from that to having to wear oxygen to watch TV and struggling to get the refrigerator door open. So it did not happen fast for us, kind of like you, Chuck. I didn't count 90, 60, but, within a few months' time, he was able to increase his stamina. His breathing was better. His oxygenation was better. He could do more exercise, what we call pulmonary and cardiac rehab. Weaned off his oxygen. And if you looked at him today, you would never know he had the challenges he had. I mean, we just, the three of us, Jerry, Jim, and Ann and I all spent with my husband Joaquin, spent 5 days. And what was funny, and I shouldn't tell you, he always flies. The only time he uses oxygen is in a plane because of the cabin pressure.
Mhm.
And so it affects his breathing and it affects his oxygenation. So he carries a little portable oxygen concentrator with him when he flies. And, he's been doing that for 10 years plus. And we got to the airport to go to the Dominican Republic and he had forgotten his POC.
Oh.
And I was like,
Wow.
Oh, shoot.
do you want to go back home and get it? It's about a 2-hour drive and I didn't know if we would make it. I was like, we can see if we can change our flights. And he was like, no, let's just go. It's a 4-hour flight. Yeah, he did great on the flight there and
Awesome.
the flight home. Didn't have any
That's great.
issues. We were like, oh my gosh, yeah, such a blessing. And I, like everybody on here, I wonder where we would be if it weren't for this gift. So anyway, did I answer the question?
Yeah, I have no idea. It just,
Anyway,
I mean,
yeah, okay, skeptical. Yeah. Well, what did they say that the one thing that Asea does cure is cynicism or
minds.
skepticism.
if you stay on it, well, if you stay on it more than buy more than a bottle or two, and you stay on it for longer than 3 or 4 days.
Yeah, I had someone ask a question, Jim, before you go on. Chuck, when you say you take 12 ounces, how do you break that up? Are you taking it in 2 servings or 3 servings or 4? How do you do it?
I do it with 3 servings.
3 servings.
Do 4 ounces 3 times a day.
Okay, perfect. I'll tell you what, I'm an 8 ouncer. I'm gonna double. You went up higher than that for a while also, didn't you?
I did. I was at 16 ounces, which was 4 ounces 4 times a day.
Okay. And then you just felt that you could go down and that was your sweet spot.
Correct.
I'm going up. I'm double.
Yeah.
That just is the trick for them. You could be using it for a long time and that you just haven't apparently met your threshold. So if you have other thresholds to conquer, I'd do that.
Maybe Ann can answer this, but it's not just because a lot of people that have got on Asea they've had health issues. I had mine with my back issues and all of that. But yet this is also designed for people that want to remain and stay healthy. It's not just about, I want to keep my health now. I want to keep this for as long as I possibly can. I want to, we have 2 more grandbabies coming in the next 7 or 8 months. And I want to live a long time, but I want to live with this intact and live healthy. So, Ann, can you maybe talk to that?
Well, I've always taught being proactive to your health, and I seek out people who are health conscious, that's their priority is to live like Lee Osler's book, Healthy Living, Healthy Cells, so Healthy Matters. So, when it comes to optimal health, we know this is fundamental. This is beyond nutrition, beyond being physically fit. When you combine this, since it is non-toxic and, some people take more than others and it doesn't matter what you weigh, more concerned with your age and your condition. But if you would do this plus clean eating, some exercise, cardiologists say no less than, 3 times a week, 30 minutes a day would be ideal, minimum, and drink good, clean water. All of that's going to make the redox work together better. I was thinking about you, Chuck, when you said at the beginning, and Jerry may not have heard this, but you had said you couldn't justify the expense. You had these cases sitting. Then you realized, I guess, when you got back home from the hospital and you were like ready to start trying it. When did you get over that realization that you needed to not only stay, on ownership and investing in the product, when you decided maybe to start sharing it? Because when you start sharing it, then you can afford to have more product, right? Because you're getting some paychecks and you're able to pay for it every month. So did it take you a number of months before you said you're sticking to it and you realized, there's no going back, that you needed to start sharing it with the world? Because I know you shared it with Dr. Lynn, which led to Dr. Osler, right? And so you did start sharing it. So maybe you can share a little bit about that, your journey of going from, okay, this is worth the expense.
Well, I actually wasn't the one that made that decision. It was my wife that made the decision that we're going to take this to the world. And quite frankly, she spent 64 days sleeping on a cot next to me at the university. So I was not telling her I'm shooting 16 ounces of snake oil at my feeding tube to make myself better.
Oh, wow.
And so she is starting to comment after about a week or two. She's like, what's going on? Your gallbladder wound is healing up really fast. What's going on? I'm not saying anything because I've been a problem child for everybody, and I didn't want to go down that path. And then when we go to the university and they're like, well, maybe you should drink this water and see what happens. And he's like, okay, we need to do a trial for you to come off that feeding tube. And this is 30 days after I started to do this. So on the 4-hour drive home from Seattle, I finally fessed up and said, well, honey, I've been putting 16 ounces of that snake oil up my feeding tube, and I think that's why I'm starting to heal. Because quite frankly, she was an Asea. She's a nurse by training, and there just wasn't the science 9 years ago there is now. So she tolerated what I was doing, poo-pooed it, and whatever it takes to keep you happy, honey, and go have fun. And then she's starting to do a little bit more research. She started reading a few of the books that are out, and she's on the back patio on her hammock, and she comes flying in the house, and she's like, "You are alive for a reason. You're alive because we have to share these molecules with everybody."
It's great.
And I was like, okay, there we go.
Man, you've gotten to be a good storyteller, my friend. It's just moving me. And it's great to see, because the world needs to hear your story. That's terrific. Jim, I wanted to jump back to something you were saying there, where in order to jumpstart a better life, you got to move. Right. You got to move where you are. And so many people, a vast majority, say, I can't move. And so this conundrum where you're stuck and say, who on earth could run a 5K, or who could go from where I am to feeling better? You've got to do something to change. Mm-hmm. Now that change, if you can tolerate the change, you can begin to start to take in the information to your cells that says you need to change. And that information is critical. The cells are adapting, they're monitoring. And that's this whole deal of upregulating the genes, the study that was done by Torrey Labs, and saying, why would it be important to upregulate this type of gene? These genes are observing the current conditions in which the cell is operating. And they're also telling the cell how well it's doing each one of the acts that it's intending to do. And it also allows for the cells to, inside the cell, to connect information and request pieces and just share. All this stuff is a language that allows the cell, it harkens back to what is the nervous system that allows a single-celled animal in a petri plate to move around and to find food? We didn't know. We had no idea, because a nervous system in a multi-celled animal like us requires a series of cells that are interconnected. And when the series of cells are interconnected, then information comes in through this long process, it goes out. But we could see that the cells were doing these little microbes that cruise around, paramecium particularly, amoebas, many of you have heard about. They purposefully go places. They purposely eat food. They can move out of the way of noxious stimuli. And how on earth do they do all that? There had to be something. And this is where we're cracking into the world of understanding that language. And the language, it appears, is powered by Asea. And once we start adding all of that back, each of the cells can start making way more appropriate decisions and build themselves in a way that make the body stronger. You start to do a little bit, testing the system, moving a bit more. Coaching is all about that. You have to challenge people to go beyond what they think their limitations are. And as you do that and go beyond those limitations, then your body says, okay, now we can monitor that and we can build better. So it's a bust in the log jam.
Jerry, or whoever wants to answer, why does it sometimes, like I had a rapid response to the molecules? Why is it that some people don't, or it may take longer, and some people may not notice anything until they stop taking it, and then they realize, oh my gosh, they realize what it was doing? Because my biggest fear, Jerry and Chuck and Maureen, is that people don't take this serious. I say we share this with fear and trembling because it's that serious what we have, but yet people tend to blow it off because it's either networking or, again, the saltwater stuff. But why is it, Jerry, sometimes it works quick and sometimes it does not?
Because it only works on the most intelligent people. No, that's the one we always throw out there. It's kind of fun.
And it was only the good-looking people. Isn't that what you told me?
Those two, there's a category where you can work on the good-looking people. So, no, really, you can actually be really sour and nasty, and it'll work anyway. Why does it? Now, this is kind of an interesting concept, but we as physicians and medical care people only have so much we can know about your body and how it works. But the body itself, the cells within the body, have a vast network of billions of communicators that can understand what's happening, how to make change, all that sort of stuff. And if we allow those things, it can make much more intelligent decisions. And it's all based on this redox. So let's say you have two people with the same problem. One of them gets better fast and the other one gets better slow. Well, the key is that many of the things that the cell has to do to fix itself might be 15, 20 steps, and they require maybe a little feedback from this step has to have this nutrient, this step has to have this vibrational harmonic, this one has to have some assist from another piece. On all of this complexity, each person's block could be a different step. Mm-hmm. Now, those steps are really interesting in that, let's say, I use this fairly commonly. By the time you're 50 years old, you've lost 50% of the ability to produce enzymes that digest food. So if you ever wondered why you could eat garbage can lids and screwdrivers when you're a little kid and you came out okay, and by the time you're in your 40s and 50s, you got heartburn and you're constipated and all that other stuff, I'm going, hey, I'm just eating the stuff I did when I was a kid. Well, your enzymes are shot. So if the process was allowed to say, okay, you guys who make enzymes, wake up in there. You know how to do this. You still have the same programming to do it. They just weren't receiving the signals. They go, okay, well, there's one thing about waking up, but then I don't think we can pull this off. We're not in shape enough. So the next set of cells that come to replace them, if they've got now new information, they get replaced better than the ones before them. Wouldn't that be amazing? And then they start producing like they used to produce when you were young. And that person might have a really quick response. Another person might have just said, well, all the stuff's laying around here. We just didn't have the information to pick it up. Boom, they get better really quick. The other one has to go around 3 or 4 cell generations before it fixes the guys who produce that to give it to you. So it can be very, very complex. Just let the body do its own wisdom and stick with it long enough.
Okay, real quick. We've only got a couple of minutes. The cell turnover, what does that mean? And how long does it take? I've always heard that. And can you kind of clarify that real quick?
Well, generally, the softer tissues turn over faster. And the ones in your mouth, your alimentary canal, your digestive tract, and all the way out through the back end change about every 2 days, even when you're old. Well, they take longer. Every one of these, the act of aging, you in large measure, especially with wrinkling and loss of muscle and all that kind of stuff, is that the cells are hanging around too long before their replacement shows up. And they just get bashed and beat up, and they can't respond, and they can't fix fast enough. So replacement and turnover means that every cell, if you kept all of the original cells, you'd start stinking pretty bad pretty quick, because you get overwhelmed and rot and die and all that sort of stuff. So it's designed that they have a useful lifespan. So it's about 2 days. And for those of you who wonder, if you burned your tongue on a pizza, how come you can eat 3 days later? But you reach in there and you look like a snake, and you pull this piece off your tongue, and you're fine. Because you got to recycle that stuff. But the harder tissues, like your tendons, ligaments, and cartilage, take much longer because they have a poor blood supply, for one thing, and they're not designed to turn over. They're designed to last longer. And so as a result, if the aggregate is every 7 years, everybody turns over. Some of them are doing it fast, some are doing it slow. But in all of them, just like when we talk about little kids, make a brand new set of skin in 14 days. All the layers are replaced, all the cells are new, and that's why they feel so yummy. And by the time you're 20, you're going to be twice as slow every 28 days. That's what Renew 28 is about, is coming back to a 20 turnover. Then when you get older, at 50 days, it might be 50. At 50 years, it might be 50 days. So the cells are just going, we ran 6 marathons now, and you're asking us to get out of bed. We're not doing it anymore. And so those cells need replacement more quickly. And when they do, the new ones can just do stuff better, and you're not susceptible. So that's one of the theories of aging. Okay. And we turn those clocks back. It's pretty quick. That's 16% in the speed of cell turnover in one study on Asea in only 30 days. 16% faster could make you look 15 years younger in a month. That sells.
Well, that's the amazement about Renew 28, is that it works twice as fast as the liquid. And even with Chuck's issue, I'm sure you used a good amount, or still do, Renew 28, because I would think that is playing a big part in keeping the optimal health as well. So I absolutely could not do a day without Renew 28. That's for sure.
Well, and we don't have time to go over everything else. So, the VIA line, because your body has to have the right nutrition, and then the facial care system, right, Maureen? We absolutely love that. And then the new cell performance. So we're creating a system at this company that is giving the body everything it needs to take care of itself. And it's crazy. It's absolutely amazing. So we're at the top of the hour. Go ahead, Jerry.
Let's try this one. Let's try this one simple explanation. Just kind of experiment with a little bit. What if we were to say that you have a map, your body has a map to figure out where to go and what to do next? And many of the things that people do in the healthcare system or in nutrition are accelerating something to move in a direction or to stop. Now, the map doesn't work very well unless you know where you're starting from. Mm-hmm. So if you can accelerate something that's going absolutely in the wrong direction, you end up with side effects, right? Right. What Asea does is it can bring you back and tell you where you are, so you can read the map from the "you are here" point of view. At that point, we can then put targeted materials into the system that will target an additional boost toward memory and mind. And you put it in a little water. One that'll do energy and provide some assist to the energy system from where you're starting. And we then can get pinpoint accuracy and improvement in specific areas. And that's what we're moving away from the general idea of coming back to neutral, to assisting those once you get there to move. And there's where your new products and skincare and all that stuff are assisting.
Awesome. Yes, so thank you, Chuck, very much.
Yes.
Jerry White, you're awesome. Next week, we have a gentleman by the name of Leland Duck, who was a what was he?
Physician.
He was a PA, an orthopedic PA.
Okay.
And then we have a young lady by the name of Ashley Ulrey. If you want to continue to hear some life-changing, unbelievable testimonials, this is where you want to come on Friday night. For those, please, that are brand new, get back to the person that brought you on the call. And I'm going to challenge everybody to go to amazingmolecules.com, amazingmolecules.com. And the topic that Jerry was talking about, if you scroll all the way down, there are videos there talking about the cell performance, talking about the new skincare system, and then talking also about our great Asea Via nutritional line. Please take a step of faith. Don't just sit back and wait until something goes wrong. Take control of your life and do something for you and for your family so that we can all be around for a very, very long time. So with that, Maureen, you want to wrap anything up?
Hey, I'm just glad that Rachel found out who Dr. Lynn was, because I couldn't put anything in the chat. I don't know why. But no, you guys, I love these testimonials. I love these guys. I love the fact that we're all here because we've had personal experience with these products.
Exactly.
And I would just say to you what Bertus Norton, our founder, said to me when my husband and I had dinner with him with our arms crossed against our chest. He said, suspend disbelief. And it's probably the best advice I've ever been given. So I'm eternally thankful to the company and to Bertus.
Thank God you did. Yes.
Chuck, how thankful are you, Chuck?
I wouldn't be here if I hadn't done it.
Yes. That's
Jerry, how about
wonderful.
you?
The change in life, the change in the full size and capability of life is immeasurable. And it's time for us to share that with as many people as we can. And
You're
right.
breaking up a little bit.
So true.
Bazinga.
Now say it again. You broke up.
Oh, the whole thing?
Well, the
No,
last word
well,
was,
this is the
basically,
last.
What? Oh, the last word?
well, it was
Ready?
weird.
Yeah.
Can you hear?
Yes.
Bazinga.
That's
For those
it.
of you who
All right.
that's
Well,
yeah.
yeah, you're breaking up a little bit. So, guys, thank you so much. I believe that I'm alive right now because a friend shared this with me 7 years ago. So, guys, come back, join us next Friday. Bring people with you. Bring them to hear the stories and hear the medical validation. We have it all. We have everything that, frankly, it demands a verdict. Don't just say it sounds ridiculous. Read the research. Go to amazingmolecules.com. Everything's there. Get back to the one that brought you on the call and get your life back in shape and start taking some action to improve your life. God bless everybody. Thank you.
Y'all have a great weekend.
Thank y'all.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks.